We're back with another episode of the SBG podcast, episode 16. And today I'd like to welcome my next guest, Mr. Austin Pinkerton. Welcome, my friend.
Hey, how's it going?
Glad to have you out here.
It's been a minute. Maybe a decade or so.
Crazy. And, I've seen your travels and, I'm excited to hear about that. But backstory on how me and Austin first got acquainted. We went to high school together, but I believe that we mostly hung out whenever you were running sound at the Wild Salmon for my band, High Octane, at the time.
Yeah. I definitely remember a little bit about those days. I was partying pretty heavily back then.
Same.
But yeah, those were fun times, man. It was definitely good band. I don't know. I don't remember exactly what happened with everyone and how that band, I don't know, came to be and then why it ceased to be, but yeah. I do remember it.
Yeah, we had two bands, or it might have been three, that passed through there. Then we did Cut Through the Dawn. We did at least one show there, if not two, and then we had a few with High Octane. But yeah, man, that was so great. Looking back on that now, cool dive bar.
It's not just us either. I have plenty of friends that still here in Lafayette, and they're like, man, I miss the salmon. I wish it would come back. I'm like, I know, dude, it would be amazing.
It's like you don't miss it till it's gone. Kind of like I think the Loose Caboose is still active, right?
Yeah, they brought it back. Somebody else is managing it now or whatever, yeah. And they're doing stuff. They're doing things. I think shows every once in a while.
That's tight.
I've been in there once since they reopened.
Was it the same vibe?
Same vibe. It looks like it's barely changed,
that's awesome.
I don't drink anymore, so I don't know anything about what they have to serve there or the price difference, but I do remember they had 25-cent Jello shots or 50-cent Pats on tab,
Kamikaze shots.
Yeah.
When I think about the Caboose, I think about my image that I see in my head is me cocked back chugging a $3 pitcher of Pabst. That's the memory, and it's just great music blaring.
Yeah, I have a bunch of memories from there. I had some friends that we do what we called the white boy trifecta, which was we'd start at the Bulldog and get maybe on a Wednesday and do dollar burgers or whatever.
Oh yeah.
And then walk down to, at the time it was the McKinley Street Pub. And then maybe the nights lined up where it was drinking on Lincoln and you could get a cup and they just keep filling it up at the bar and you'd tip the bartender. And then we'd end the night at the Boost and, have cheap drinks there.
Hell yeah.
Later on, I had some other friends who lived in the area. So we just drink at the Boost and then come 1:30 or something when they're about to close. We'd walk to the little gas station around the corner and
Tammy's
40s,
yeah.
And then go back to his house, which was right down the street, and then just drink 40s on the porch till 4 or 5 a.m.
At the end of the night, start chugging 40s.
Yeah.
Damn.
Those are some times, man. Don't remember a lot of them, but they happened.
Man, just talking about 40s makes me want to chug one right now. I'll have to line that up for the next podcast.
Yeah, do that.
I had my one of my bosses come over 4 or 5 episodes ago, and he surprised me with an Old English.
Oh, nice.
He busted that out of his bag.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we were getting was maybe Colt 45 or OE. I don't remember the selection, but
I have yet to try a Colt 45, but I really want to.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's just as
ignorant as all the other 40s. I think a couple times we played Edward 40 hands. Yeah. You'd tape 40s to both your hands, and you couldn't go get them untaped until you finished both of them.
Holy
I
shit.
could never do it. I'd maybe finish one and be I'm done. I have to pee so bad right now. You win.
80 ounces of malt liquor.
Yeah.
Amazing. But so, okay, you started your sound career at around the salmon and all that stuff, and then you pretty much like did you know that you wanted to do that as like a life profession?
So actually, I started doing sound at this club called Mojo Monkeys, which was farther down Jinmu. You'd pass over, I forget the street name, and it was like a little dive bar that always had metal bands. This lesbian couple owned it. They were fucking awesome. And I was in high school at the time. My buddy Taylor Bork worked there, and he'd call me up and be like, hey, I'm bored. You want to come see a metal show, and I'll try and get free beer for you? So I'd go hang out with him in the sound booth.
Oh, man.
And they'd give us some, like, cheap beer or whatever and watch shows, drinking underage. Maybe don't put that on the podcast. I don't know.
It's all water under the bridge now.
But I'd watch the shows, and then one day he goes, hey, I'm going out of town with my family on vacation to Disney. Do you think you'd be able to cover me? And I'm like, I mean, I've seen you do that stuff, but I don't know what's going on. I've never done it. He's like, it'll be all right. I'll write you out like a little guide on what you have to do. So he gave me instructions, and of course it was a nightmare.
Yeah, so many buttons and shit to press.
Yeah, exactly. And, it was terrible, but I guess I eventually got better at it. And I think I went a long time. That place eventually closed, and I went a long time without doing sound. I got in the industry doing, like, stagehand work for this company called Rhino. I worked at the conventions, or the Cajun Dome for a very short while. And I didn't really get back into doing sound until the Wild Salmon opened, because I was buddies with Tanner Dimmick.
Yeah.
And his parents owned the bar, and I went in one day and I saw a guy setting up some speakers, and I was like, oh, hey, what's going on here, He's like, oh, yeah, they're putting in a sound system, and we're going to do bands and stuff here. I was like, oh, cool. Well, I do sound. If you ever need a guy, I live right down the street. I'm friends with Tanner, just hit me up. And that's how I kind of got into that relationship of working there.
Oh, man, that's awesome.
In the between time, I think in between that, I had started working for this 80s hair metal cover band right now they're called LA Rocks, but back in the day they were called Butt Rocks.
Yeah. Josh was here. He's the bass player for them now.
Yeah. And
awesome.
So I was guitar teching for their guitar player at the time.
Was that Wells?
Wells Cornet. And it was pretty simple. It was just like string the guitars, tune them, set up the pedal board, make sure it works, and he kind of did everything else. Didn't pay very well, but it was kind of a cool experience. We got to go around Louisiana at the time and do different stuff. And they were renting a sound system from a company out of Lake Charles that I kind of got hooked up with like that. And their front of house guy was this guy named Brian Post, originally out of Tampa, but has lived all over. He died a few years back, but we were doing a show, and the bass rig went out on stage, and I hear him yell at me like, Austin, bass rig's out, fix it. So I go up on stage, and I'm like looking, and okay, the bass head doesn't have power. What do I do? So I unplug it, and I plug it into a different receptacle, and it comes back on.
Hell
and he's like, oh, yeah, you're awesome.
He's the man.
Do you want a job? So he hooked me up with a job at this sound production company, which back then they were operating out of more of like a storage unit thing. But now they're like pretty huge. They own like multi-million-dollar sound systems and stuff. And worked with them, and they had a sister company that they shared a warehouse with that did more video stuff, but they also owned audio, Will Pro Services and Upscale Productions, and kind of went back and forth with them, working at the Salmon. And I think eventually I, at one point, moved to Lake Charles, and I was like their shop manager at Upscale and Will Pro, but I didn't enjoy that as much. It was kind of like soul-sucking 9-to-5 job sort of thing, and I got more like gratification out of doing sound, so eventually I left and started freelancing again or whatever. I mean, do you want me to continue on
I thought you were had a thought. Yeah.
How all that came to be to where I'm at now, or do you want to?
Yeah, so, how did you end up getting into like the bands that are like touring? Because I know you just came off of a tour with Anthrax or like Black Label.
I work for quite a few bands right now. Anthrax, Black Label Society, I fill in for. I don't officially work for them full time, but they do use me a lot. And then the band Pretty Lights, which is like a electronic
EDM.
Jam band sort of thing.
How did you break into the like bigger band space, like like that tier of band?
So after I left that company in Lake Charles, I moved back to Lafayette, and I was just working at like a pizza place. I don't remember exactly. And I got hooked up with a company out of New Orleans, Corporate Lighting and Audio, and I went and did a gig for them and met the owner's son, and he really liked me, and he was like, hey, we're kind of looking for like a full-time audio guy. Are you available? And I said yes. And I ended up moving down there and working for them for a year. And then my buddy Brian Post, the guy who originally got me the job working at Upscale and Will Pro, called me because at the time he was working for Gwar, Korn, and Lamb of God, and he needed help figuring out how to set up a certain sound system that the band just bought, Gwar bought. And I kind of told him like, oh yeah, you need this, or you can hook it up this way or this way, depending on how you want to use it or whatever. And then a few months later, he said, hey, I have conflicting dates. I have to go do this thing with Korn. Can you cover me with Gwar? I was like, well, I know the setup because we've already talked about it. Should be pretty easy. So I flew out, covered him for a week, and then he got back. And I went back to working at my job, but he hit me up a few days later and was like, how'd you like it? Would you want to do this more permanently? Because I'm too busy between Lamb of God and Korn to like do this as well. And I was like, yeah, sure, I'll work for Gwar. Like, that seems sick. Pretty cool. And like, unbeknownst to them, I've never toured before. I've been around touring for a long time. And in fact, after I left, I talked to a few of the guys. We're still friends. And I was like, do you know that when I started working for y'all, I'd never toured before? And they're like, no, you didn't. You never seemed like it. You seemed like you just knew what was up. So that's how I broke into touring. And pretty much this guy, Brian Post, has got me most of my gigs. He got me into Gwar, and then he was working for Anthrax for a while. And after he died, they maybe went off a recommendation from him for this guy, but that person wasn't available, so that person recommended me, and then that's how I got into that, you know. And
that's sick.
The touring game is a lot of networking. It's about who you know. It's not really like there are people online who ask like, how do I break into touring? Like, I'm trying to go to school for this and whatever, and like all that's good. You can learn a lot of things in school, but it really comes down to just like street cred and street smarts. Like, you've done the work, you put the work in, and I've been doing this 17 or 18 years now.
Damn,
so I've like had the experience, and a lot of these guys really like that I've run into a lot of these problems. They're common, and when they happen, I don't freak out. I'm like, what's going on? How do I do this? I'm like, I think I know what the problem is, and I calmly go and work on it or fix it. And they're like, oh yeah, that guy's cool. He doesn't sit there with like a deer in headlights, you know.
It's so easy to get flustered whenever, because there's like a lot of pressure to keep the damn show going, right?
It is. It's not like a studio where like, oh, you go in and you make a mistake and you're like, oh, let me go back and fix that. It's like everything's in the moment. You get one chance to do it right, but it's really rewarding when you do set it up all right and you have a great show and there aren't any problems. You're like, I got this, you know.
Man, that is sick.
And that the more often you do it, the less prone you are to like freak out about a problem happening. So that's one thing like the guys in Gwar told me. They're like, oh, Austin's like the tech with 1,000-yard stare, you know, like something's happening and he's just like, okay, yeah, I got it. I know what's going on, you know.
Very calm and collected.
Yeah.
Oh man, that's awesome. So how was you got to actually like meet Zach Wild? No.
Yeah, I've worked around Zach for 6 or so years. I started the first time I was around him. I was on tour with Corrosion of Conformity, and my buddy Taylor was drumming for them.
Yeah, I saw he's put that video. I was like, look at this dude. He made it, man. That shit is super tight.
And he hit me up to be his drum tech / monitor engineer, but they didn't. I was more there if the house guy was like having problems. I could go help figure out what was happening and fix it. They didn't. I don't think they really expected me to actually like drum tech and mix the show because it's kind of hard to do both at the same time. You're kind of spread too thin when you have too many hats in the job, you know.
Yeah.
But we were direct support for Black Label Society, so I was around Zach, and it was a strange thing, you know. I mean, I'd been around big celebrities before, but Zach is like a very tall person, so he's already kind of like
imposing
person. He's very built, you know. He is always in charge of a conversation. I'd be walking backstage to do something, and he'd be talking to a few people, and not even really like knowing me or knowing who I am. He'd be like, "Hey, man, this," and like go into a story about something and like asking people like what they think or whatever, you know. And it's like, oh, okay, yeah. Like, I don't know. Back then, the best thing I think to do with a celebrity who's like trying to talk to me about something, and it's just like smile and say yes. You're like, oh yeah, you know.
It sounds like a grandpa that wants to tell you a story type vibe. Is that kind of what it is? Like pull you off and just start slinging this story at you?
It's a little bit like that. He's got to be in charge of whatever's going on, you know. He very often, like I said, would walk up to us on stage or whatever and just start telling a story about something. He's like, oh, you know, you got this or whatever. And the second he feels like he's not in charge of a conversation is when he's kind of like, all right, I'm out. So
disengage.
So he like for instance, when I started working with him again was recently with Anthrax. Black Label was co-headlining, and we'd be on stage, we'd be set up, and he'd walk to stage, and like me and Scott Ian's guitar tech, we'd be hanging out. He'd come up and be like, oh, hey, and start talking about stuff, and then it'd kind of get a lull in the conversation, so I'd try and like interject something in and be like, oh yeah, I heard you know, you're doing Pantera now. How's that? And he's like, oh yeah, you know, and then just like walk off. It's like, he doesn't really want to, he wants to have like a one-way conversation with people, you know. But he's a good guy. He takes care of his crew. He like makes sure that everything's all right. Always hooking them up with like the swag. He's very branded, Black Label Society, you know. He like, if you're working for him, he wants to make sure you're repping Black Label stuff. And his reasoning, so say, is like, oh, if you were playing, you know, like football or baseball for a team, would you wear a different team's jersey?
Right.
Like, so we wear Black Label stuff in this camp.
Man, that's
okay.
That's super cool. Yeah, it's I've only rubbed elbows with a few big names in the music industry like that. You know, we with High Octane, we played with like Saliva and otherwise, and a few like mid tier. I mean, I say mid tier, like they were big in the early 2000s, right? Like that's size of band. But we got to play. I think we opened up for Kill Devil Hill one time at Grant Street.
Okay.
Have you heard of them?
I don't think so. I do know Grant Street. I work there as well.
It was Vinny Appice from Black Sabbath whenever they had Dio singing for them.
Okay.
And Rex Brown on bass.
Okay.
And so the only one that I really knew was Rex, had heard of, and he stayed on the tour bus like up until the point where it was time to play. He played, and then he like signed a few autographs and then got right back on the bus. But Vinny was the guy that came off first and like came up and shook my hand and like introduced himself and shit. And I was like, hey man, it's cool. I didn't really know who he was at the time. And I was like, later on in life, I was like kicking myself because I ended up listening to the albums that he actually drummed for, and it was just like some of the best shit. And like, I wish I could go back and just like talk to him about that, but
yeah,
just so crazy. Like you just don't. It was like aliens came down to Earth, and I was like, what's going on, man?
Yeah, I don't get as starstruck. There's not many people that really are like I'm blown away by. I know who they are and stuff. The main thing you got to think is like these guys are used to being around people who are starstruck all the time. They're very rarely treated like an equal or a friend. So if you're just like have a friendly conversation with them, they love that shit. Every band I work for, I try and, not only am I just their sound engineer, but I try and be their friend to an extent as well. I text them on Christmas, or if I see it's their birthday, hey, happy birthday, whatever, or,
Nice.
they're people just like us. They're not something bigger, and they really appreciate a lot of the time if you just treat them like every other person you would.
That's great. So are you in between touring right now? Like I'm glad that you were able to make it out here tonight. So that's great.
I'm not on. I am on tour. This artist, Pretty Lights, they only do fly dates. So pretty much all year, every weekend, I've been flying out on like a Wednesday or Thursday, or sometimes a Friday, doing a weekend show and flying back on a Sunday or Monday.
Yeah.
And it's been like that pretty much all year, 2 flights a week sort of thing. Earlier this year, I was in South America with Anthrax for a month. This weekend coming up, I'm going to Sacramento with Anthrax to do Aftershock, which they'll have, I think, Iron Maiden and Slayer and a whole bunch of other bands there. Then the week after that, I will be in St. Louis, but that's for a corporate event. That's that company I work for in New Orleans. They do more of like talking head stuff. Like a company they want to throw like a big like seminar or something, and they rent sound stuff from us, and I just go out and set it up and make sure it all works. And then the week after that, I'll be in Vegas with Pretty Lights for 5 days. And then I have a week off and then go to Europe with Anthrax for a month with Creator and Testament.
Nice. How many times have you flown like overseas to do shows?
A couple, at least. I know last year or the year before, with Anthrax, we were going to do a European tour, but logistics weren't working out where it was like monetarily feasible. So we just shortened it to be just in the UK, and we did a week and a half or 2 weeks in the UK, which was pretty cool. It's strange. I had never been to the UK before, but I got to see some places like London. I went down to Scotland Yard and saw some places around there. Maybe some tours are different, but with us, we don't really get a lot of downtime. It's like days off are few and far between, and a lot of the times I'm just exhausted, and I'm like, I just need to like relax in my hotel room and get my energy back.
How was the food? Was it like bland compared to down here?
Maybe some places, but they do have a lot of like multinational food there. So like there's Indian and like Asian food in a lot of places, and they did have some. I remember there's this breakfast spot that they have in a lot of places that I really liked, and they'd serve like sausage croissants that were pretty good, and they're like really cheap. Ended up being like $2 American or whatever the conversion was, and they were like everywhere. So I'd like wake up and get off the bus, and I have like an hour until we load in. I'm gonna walk down the street and get a breakfast and come back and scope out the venue, get the lay of the land, see what's going on, you know.
That's tight, man.
But I don't think I had many like traditional UK foods while I was there.
You didn't have any fish and chips, bro?
I don't think I did fish and chips. I've had fish and chips other places, you know, here in the States, but also just probably not really my kind of food, you know.
Have a muggy onion soup here, son.
Did you see that? Is that the Instagram post? Yeah, that one's fucking hilarious.
Got bovril and wheat.
The guitar techs for Anthrax, we always like to, you know, joke around about the British. So we're like finding all those funny British Instagram reels and sharing them with each other.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, yeah, like the lifestyle of being on tour, I can't even imagine, because, you know, we got the house here, right? So I can't imagine like having to be away from, I guess, like your home base, or like, did you straight up not have like an apartment, or like you just lived on the road with them?
No, I've always had a place to live. I mean, a few years ago, my girlfriend and I got a place in Harahan, which is like right outside of New Orleans. It's the suburbs of New Orleans. But she stays home, and, you know, she has like a more normal job. But even when I wasn't with somebody, it wasn't really that hard. I would just like make sure most things are turned off before I leave. I got some smart things, like a smart window unit, and I would like use an app. If I was flying home, I'd be like, oh, my house, the AC hasn't been on for a few days, let me turn it back on or whatever. Or now the house we live in, I have way more smart stuff. I have like basically I'm using this thing called Home Assistant, and on a Raspberry Pi, and it ingests a bunch of plugins for different manufacturers. So I have like a Google Nest, and like I can make it do so many different things. I right now I have a geofence set up to where if like my girlfriend and I are not inside the geofence, it turns our HVAC into like power saving mode. And then when we come back in the geofence, it kicks it back into like comfort mode or whatever. You can do so many other things with it. I've done a few fun things. Like I have Ring doorbell cameras, and I made a little, it's sort of like if this, then that sort of thing. So if somebody rings my doorbell, two things happen. I have like this LED lighting around my office, which is in the very back of the house, and it makes them flash because a lot of the times I have my headset on and I'm gaming. I'm not looking at my phone, so I don't know if somebody's like trying to ring the doorbell, but I see the lights flash and I'm like, oh shit, somebody's at the door, hang on, I gotta go.
That's pretty
And
slick.
it also plays, I have like a Google speaker thing, and it just announces like, actually no, I set up a custom doorbell sound where I just took an audio clip and uploaded it to a website, and it makes a call to that website and plays that audio sound through my doorbell. So I don't know if you've ever watched what is it? Not the IT Crowd, or maybe it is. It's that British show.
I don't even know. I'm not too versed on many shows.
It's a clip from that. Basically, it's this guy singing and dancing. It's like, it's somebody at the door. There's somebody at the door. There's somebody at the door. Hey, it's my G. There's other little things I did. Like we have a detached garage where our washer and dryer are. So it's hard to tell if like they are done or whatever, if there's a problem and it stops itself. And they're smart though. You can connect them to Wi-Fi, and I have a thing where like whenever they're done, it also plays a sound on that Google speaker, which is just like dryer's done or washer's done or whatever, so we know to go out and check on it or whatever.
Nice. Our washing machine is it's not hard to tell whenever it's stopped, because I don't know if like something balancing is messed up in it, but it slams the floor when it's trying to drain the water, and most of the time it does not. So we have to hang it up on the line most of the time. But it makes it to where you know when it's done, because the slamming on the floor stops.
Yeah, that's a good indicator.
It's like the house isn't shaking anymore. All right, the clothes are done. Then we just hang it on the line, and you'd be surprised. Here's a little pro tip for saving money too. Drying your clothes consumes a lot of electricity, and if you buy some simple line and hang it up on a clothesline, you will save probably like $50 a month, maybe a little bit more, depending on if your family goes through a lot of clothes. So that's a pro tip. You heard it here first. Clothesline, old school. Yeah. They had it right. Why fuck with perfection? Exactly. Yeah, Little House on the Prairie style. That's how we've been doing it out here.
Yeah, I mean, you got enough room. It's actually really nice out here.
Appreciate that. It's definitely very calm. I don't know if you remember Justin Doan.
I know who that is, yeah.
Whenever he came out here and did an episode, he was just like, he would have to pause when he was outside, and he would just look around and be like, man, it's so quiet. It's like eerily quiet, because he lives like off of, what was it, behind... I don't know, by the train tracks, by the feed and seed and all that stuff.
Oh, yeah. It's very noise pollution out there.
Yep. But, so, aside from music, I also used to game pretty frequently with this man, that old Elite Dangerous.
Yeah, we went down some rabbit holes with it. I think, what were we doing, mining? Is that? So
it was whenever that update 2.0 had come out, and you could have, what was it, a passenger in your spaceship with you.
Yeah.
And so I would like go and mine like 200 million credits worth of like a specific ore, and just text you to get to hop in my ship, and then I would just like fly back, and you would be there for like 5 minutes and make like half a billion or something.
Yeah. Man, that is such a great game, and I honestly wish I could get more into it now, here years later. There's just so much to do. It's like,
oh yeah,
I'm the type of guy, when I play a game, I kind of want to be like a completionist. Like, I do the main story, but then when there's all the side quests, I got to do every side quest. I got to check out every nook and cranny. I got to find all the like most OP weapons or whatever. But in that game, it's a recreation of the entire Milky Way. I think they said like less than 3% of it has been actually visited. Jeez. You can go to every single star system in the entire Milky Way. I mean, the ones closest to us are real life, but then as you get farther out, it's all just like procedurally generated. But so many different things to do. You can move passengers around, move cargo around. You can bounty hunt. You can do things for like your faction. There's so many options that I just get like information overload, and I'm like, I don't really want to do any of that stuff. There's too many things to do. And then especially if you want to like outfit your ship with all the like upgraded, what do they call
Primo components.
Yeah, you have to grind for all that, and it's all very specific, time consuming.
They are one of the kings of the grind, I will say, because like that company that made that game, I think it's like Frontier or something like that. They also,
which, by the way, they made two older games that I used to play when I was younger, Free Space 1 and 2. Awesome games.
Hell yeah. I think they might have. No, I don't know if it was them that did Privateer, or it was. Yeah, it might have been a different company that.
I'm not too sure. I do know that they did those Free Space games because I loved them as a kid. Anything outer space, I was infatuated with.
Hell yeah. That's actually what started my love for that game, was Privateer. I used to play that with my dad back in the day on his old Packard Bell. But yeah, I used to. I had gotten Elite on my PlayStation 3 or 4 back in the day, and I was playing that, and I was running those passenger missions. And as you mentioned that, I remembered they had a. I had like grinded up because you have to have like a certain amount of reputation, and then you can start taking like higher profile people and making more
Yeah.
money and all that shit. And then I had finally worked up to like the Beluga ship,
Yeah.
giant ship. But then anybody who's played this game, it's an obscure game. Not many people have played it, but the space stations are super tight. They look super cool, but to get into them, this is like little
There's a
mail
little credit card slot.
Yeah, it's like they could have for sure gave you a little bit more room. So they did this shit probably to troll people, but so there's like big ships coming in and out of the same slot, and there's a lot of like NPC traffic going on right there. And the controls, I mean, it's a flight simulation type game, so it's not like easy controls, right?
Oh, it's really hard, especially like the big ships are hard to control.
Yeah.
The small ships, if you want to do cool stuff like zip around, you got to do things like turn on and off your like control system that like
Yes.
stabilizes your dude, it's way over the top in every aspect of that game.
So I think I had taken a little break, and I was like trying to get back into it, and I was docked at this space station, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna pick up a bunch of high profile passengers, get this shit back on the road. I had loaded up a full, big ass ship. And I'm like trying to remember the controls on the PlayStation controller I'll launch, and I'm like, oh my god, I can't remember how to do it. And it's like inside of a space station is not where you want to figure out the controls.
Oh
again.
no, because
So,
you like start crashing into stuff, and
I
like
did.
if you hit another ship, now you're in trouble with
Oh,
like
yeah.
the fucking police.
And that is
you-
exactly what happened. I freaking was fumbling my buttons, and I hit the like boost button inside the damn thing. And look, that ship was huge, so you can't just like instantly pull up. So I like blasted off going 100 miles an hour inside the space station, and I'm like trying to come up, and the mail slot is just it's not happening. And I clipped the bottom of the mail slot, and it took away like all my shield, and then it jettisoned me into a big ass ship right above me, and like blew that ship up and left me at like 5% of my hull to start the journey with all these high profile people. And then the port authority was like aggroed to me because I had just destroyed, and then they just blew me up. So it was just like instant fucked.
That game really is like also like the Dark Souls of like space games, because there's no guidance. There's no like tutorial area. They're just like, oh, go and do this, and like you go do this one thing, and then they're like, all right, do whatever you want, and then that's it. You don't get any more help. Like
Yep.
luckily nowadays they got like the internet where you can like Google stuff, but it's crazy.
Ooh, so good. Have you ever like dabbled in Eve Online?
I have always been super interested in it, but I've never played it. I know it is equally as ridiculous. Less flight simmy, more like colony sim
Oh,
sort
yeah.
of stuff. But
It is so good. I got heavy into it whenever I was living in my apartment, and I had time to play it. And it sucks you in so hard because it's like time gated on a lot of things. Like you have your pilot, and you can like queue up like things to learn, because to be able to like pilot certain ships, you have to like know the shit, or like download the knowledge matrix style into your pilot, right? And you can queue things up to learn while you're not playing.
yeah,
So then that's how it starts to become like, okay, you got all this time thing happening. You got a lot of time invested in this one character. If it dies, a lot of that shit goes away. So then you
Yeah.
have like a lot invested into one ship or whatever. And man, just like going into that rabbit hole of like, you get into like a guild basically, and then you're off in the middle of nowhere mining stuff. And at one point I had like 3, because they let you multi-box, because that's more money for the company, so
Yeah.
why not,
yeah.
So I was multi-boxing like 3 different ships, and I was like watching them all at the same time. And if somebody would like port into the sector, you could like see their name pop up. And that happened, and they like instantly killed one of my guys. And I was like, how is it possible that this dude just like insta-gibbed my ship while I'm like looking at the ship? There's no like way to mitigate
Yeah.
that. And then my girlfriend at the time was like, there's probably hired somebody on their payroll to go and seek out people and blow them up, and you would never know. And it's like, you're right. They might
They're
be
just in the
doing that
background,
shit.
like rubbing their hands together. Like, yeah.
I think that was like a turning point in me playing that game, but it was super tight. It's just, man, you get sucked in pretty hard if you.
I've heard all sorts of stories about how, like, I'm not 100% sure because I didn't play it, but I assume, can you spend in real life money to get in-game money? And then there's ships that are worth like thousands of dollars in real life money.
Oh yeah.
And like, dude, crazy stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a lot of like.
Sure, you'd be pretty pissed if that ship got blew up. You'd like a couple grand just go down the toilet.
Because it's like you can pay for like what is it, like all the skills that you have queued up for your pilot to learn. You can like buy some consumable that like chews
Boosts
through that
it or
time.
whatever,
Yeah,
yeah.
and that's what it is. And it's just like, oh my god, I can't even imagine.
Yeah.
But what you been gaming anything in particular these days?
I've been playing a lot of Escape from Tarkov. Do you know what that is, or
like
have you played it?
Battle Royale type.
It's not. So it's a looter shooter extract game. I believe it was maybe one of the first of its kind, and the premise behind it is like there is a war-torn land where there's no real sense of government or anything, and you basically have like private military contractors and these things called scavs, which are just like local people who are still in the area. And you start the game and you have like these traders who give you quests, even though it's like a shooting game. And they're basically like, hey, go to this area and find this thing and bring it back to me. And another one's like, oh, go kill these kinds of people. And you go in and you do the things, but you can also find things in game which you can use to upgrade your hideout, which is kind of like your area that your character goes to in between these raids. So you can make like a medical center, which helps you like heal faster in between raids, or you can make meds in that you don't have to buy. And there's like a flea market. You get to a certain level and then you can start trading with other players. You can do like direct trades, which people don't do a lot of the times. It's mainly just for money. Like, oh, I have this thing and it's rare, and sell it for millions of like rubles or whatever. And then there's not really an end game besides just trying to complete all the quests and get a higher level character, because certain things are level locked or quest locked, and you do it and then you're like, oh, now I can buy this really good armor or this really good gun or this really good ammo. And it's been out for quite a few years. I've been playing it. I think I have around like 1,200 hours in it or something.
Damn. Is it kind of like The Division?
It's sort of like The Division, yeah. If you die in game, though, you lose all the stuff that you have on you. It's like your character, whoever kills you. So there is like a insurance mechanic where you can like insure your stuff, and if nobody touches your dead body, then 12 or 24 or 36 hours later, it'll be brought back to you, and then you have to like claim it back. But for the most part, if somebody kills you, they're going to be like, oh, what does he have? And like loot through all your stuff and be like, oh, he has this good gun. I'm going to take his gun or all of his good ammo or something like that.
So it is like multiplayer then.
It is multiplayer. The main mechanic is like each map has a different amount of like players can be on it. And you can be on teams, which I think the max team size is like 5. But certain maps, it's like max 8 or 12 or 16 players. So you always know there's going to be like enemy players on the map as well as AI. Recently, though, they came out with a mode called PvE mode. So there aren't any other players besides the people that are on your team, and it's just AI. Which my friends and I have been playing that version just because the game has been kind of riddled with cheaters.
Oh, really?
So they go to all like the maps with the best loot, and they go and like vacuum loot it up, or they like fly hack or whatever and like kill you from places you could never imagine and stuff like that. I'll fly under the map and kill you. So we took a break from playing the PvP version and we've just been playing the PvE version, which has been a lot more fun just because there's never that, man, was that guy cheating? It's like, oh, I died to something legit. Every death is legit in this, and you still die in really fucked up ways, and we just call that getting Tarkov. You know, like, you'll be wearing full like face armor, and some guy with like the weakest possible round like hits you in the face, and one hits you, and you die, and you're like, what the fuck?
He shot you right in the pupil.
Yeah, you know, you're just getting Tarkov. You know, it happens. There's a lot of mechanics in the game. Different ammo has different like penetration and damage and like ballistics, like, you know, how the bullet drops and stuff.
I like that.
There's a lot of nuances about that game, and one of the cool ones is just like a lot of the things are just taken from actual real life weapons or armor or companies, you know. So you have like you know, H&K MP5s and like Steiner variable optic scopes or B&T or, you know, Vortex, like any like big name stuff. It's like they have the real life version of that thing in the game, which is really cool. You know, you'd be like, oh, I want to make the gun I have in real life in the game, or vice versa, or whatever. You know, you can do all that stuff, which is fun.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I remember briefly I had got into War Thunder.
I played a lot of that as well.
Yeah?
Yeah. I have the flight sim set up with like a HOTAS and the 3D. I have like an Oculus that if you use it, it like puts you in the cockpit. You can look out through the windows and stuff, or like the Stuka bombers or whatever. You have like your bomb glass in between your feet. You can line it up and do your roll and drop your bomb and stuff.
Man, I didn't realize they like went that hard into the VR aspect of it. That's super cool.
It is. VR is awesome. It takes some getting used to, you know. Like at first when I'd started, I'd have to like play for 5 minutes and then set it down because you get like motion sickness. Yeah. But you can work your tolerance up. It does go away though. I worked my way up where I could do about an hour and a half because I did a reenactment of the Battle of Dunkirk with some Twitch streamers over COVID, and that was really awesome. But I didn't play for a year or two, and then I came back, and after 5 minutes, I was just like sick to my stomach. Oh God, I gotta work my way back up if I want to do this more often.
That's great. Yeah, I remember my buddy had a theory because there was like, you know, everything in that game is like based off of real life, like all the armor and all the, you know, everything, performance for the different vehicles. It's a tank game, right? So there's tanks, and then there's like Navy, and then there's aerial vehicles. But the forums or like the Discord for that game is where a bunch of like actual military secrets got leaked to
really?
Russian shit. Yeah,
I didn't know that.
And my buddy had a theory that, because the game is like a Russian-made game, I believe, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay, so is Escape from Tarkov.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So my buddy had a theory that I think ended up being proven, that people were playing that game and baiting information. Because, like, typically people who congregate in that game, you know, it's normal people, but there's a lot of people that are like, you know, real sweaty about like, this is how these vehicles perform, and they're like, you know, could have you know, actual know-how or actual information of these vehicles and shit, and that they would like, he had a theory that they would make American vehicles shitty on purpose, so that it would bait people that knew better into like disclosing why the vehicles are better, and then it would like leak sensitive information, and that has happened like a handful of times. So super interesting. I don't know if it's some sort of like spy op happening or something.
I didn't hear about that, but I did hear there's this guy that played a lot of Microsoft Flight Simulator, and he basically learned how to fly a jet and then went and hijacked a jet and used all of his knowledge from the game to go take a plane on a joyride or whatever. And I don't remember if he landed it or crashed or whatever.
Was that the Sky King? Was that?
I don't remember names or anything about it, but I do remember that is a thing. And I do play flight sims, and like a lot of them, you can get real like into it where people build like full reproduction cockpits, and they have like their monitors as like the airplane windows, and every little button they have mapped like maybe like a stream deck or something similar. Every button has a function, you know.
That's
you can really, I mean, I think a lot of pilots do it as well, you know, or retired pilots. They like to go back and like experience flying the planes they used to fly or whatever.
Oh, yeah. That's awesome. I actually just sold my HOTUS recently. Actually today.
Oh, no.
That was an interesting experience. But yeah, that was something I just like, if I had the space to like set them up properly, I would have kept them, but you don't realize until you like buy them. HOTUS is like a throttle system, like to hook up for those flight simulator games, like a throttle and a joystick. But it's like bulky, and if you don't have like a proper setup for it, it's like I remember because whenever I first got them, I was like at my apartment. I was like, okay, how the hell am I supposed to play this? I have like a normal chair. Like they have suction cups on the bottom of them so that you can like attach them to your desk, but I couldn't get proper movement on my desk. So like I ended up grabbing an ironing board and putting it on my lap with like a board game so that I could have some sort of like suction. I was playing like that. And I was like, man, there's got to be a better way.
There are like, I mean, you could do the same thing. You can build out a cockpit. They have now like sort of like a car racing setup, but instead it's more for like flying or whatever. What I do is I bought these clamp on mouse pads, so they like go on a desk and they grab the side of it, and you use like a screw to tension it, and then it's got a swiveling mouse pad on it, and I would just set one in between my legs, and I could like rubber band the joystick to it, and then I have an L-shaped desk, so I had another one that flipped out, and I could set my throttle on that. And then when I'm not playing, I just take them off and store them under the desk and flip the little swivel things in where they're out of the way. But it's not super elegant, but it works. If I were going to play it more often or all the time, I'd probably buy something nicer. Like they sell fully adjustable desk clamp ones where you can adjust like the height and everything, and then it quick disconnects if you need to like get it out of the way if you're just going to use your computer normally or whatever. But they're super expensive, you know.
Yeah. The luxury peripherals.
Yeah.
It's tight. Well, I think we're getting towards the end of it. I probably borrowed enough time from my my wife taking care of the baby in there. I'm sure he's screaming his head off. But I'm glad you came out, and you know.
Yeah, no problem, man.
Do this again later down the road whenever you got some more stories to tell, you know.
Yeah, we didn't get into a whole bunch of the stories, but there are a ton of them.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, look, we got a little bit of time left. Hit us with one real quick before we close it out. Now you piqued my curiosity. We got.
Okay, let me try and think of a good one. What is this podcast rated? That is a
M for mature sure.
Okay. So
he's thinking real hard.
Okay. The current lead singer for Gwar, his name's Michael Bishop. Very smart guy. I think he has like 1 or 2 PhDs or something. But he was the original bass player for Gwar. And then Dave Brocky at the time was the lead singer. And he was telling me a story about how back in the day, they would, you know, on tour, they had peep shows in New York. And you'd go into this little booth and close the curtain and put some money in. And then another curtain would open and there'd be a girl behind it. And she'd dance sexily or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So he said he went to one of these peep shows, and he was feeling kind of horny, so he started,
cranking
one out. And the whole time the girls, they weren't like fully shown, they're kind of like covering themselves. And he was getting towards climax, and he tells the girl, he's like, I want to see you. So she moves her stuff, and it ends up it's a she, and the junk pops out, but it's too late. He's already coming. And he, oh no! So he starts to feel really bad about it, and he goes to Dave Brocky and explains like everything that happened. And he's like, I feel really bad. Does this mean I'm gay? And Dave's like, oh yeah, you're gay, dude. And it made him feel even worse about it. So he's like, oh man, like I'm just so distraught about this. That Dave Brocky is like sees that he's distraught, and he goes, all right, look. You're not gay, but you did a gay thing. So that was a joke we would say on tour a lot. It's like, oh, no, you're not gay. You just did a gay thing. So.
I really wish that I could have hung out with Dave Brocky at any point during his height of things, because I remember seeing I never had any kind of clue as to Gwar, how they were, and I saw a video of Dave Brocky like before or after a show. And just like him talking was just hilarious. Like he seemed so cracked out. It's pretty great.
He was pretty out there. I never got to meet him. I think I might have seen one or two shows with him as the front man, but I didn't start working for them until they had already replaced Dave and I forget his name, the guitar player that died as well. But all those dudes, super cool dudes, super awesome, super funny. They're like some of the wittiest guys you can ever come across. Like every situation, every second of every day is just filled with jokes. Like they can turn anything into something funny, It's just constant laughter.
That's awesome. It must have made for like a really great touring atmosphere, because I can imagine if you're on tour with some dickheads, it's probably like, oh my god, this is gonna be a long one. But if everybody's fun like that,
yeah, that goes for a lot of touring artists. Is like sometimes it's not about how good somebody is at something. If you're shitty to be around, you just like won't get the gig.
Oh yeah.
So like you cannot be the best at what you do, but if you're awesome to be around, that like shows a lot,
Mm-hmm. I'll share a funny story that we had in our band days. We I may have talked about it already in one of the episodes, but we had a show where we had just gone to, or it had just had a bunch of rain come through in Port Barre, and we had a show that we had scheduled at Levee Landing. Have you ever heard of that place?
I think so. I don't think I've ever been though.
It's, I'm not knocking it. Maybe it's a great place. I only went after this flooding shit happened. Maybe a lot of people go there, but skewed view of things. It wasn't a huge place or anything by any means, and it was on the side of a levee, and like as we were driving there, like the houses were still flooded, right, going to this thing, and I was like, this looks not great. I'm sure that everybody that goes to this bar, these are all their houses, so they're not going to be very chipper about us playing there. And we get there, and everybody's just fucking like sulking and drinking their woes away. And we get there, and like, all right, there's this. It wasn't a stage; it was like the corner of the bar, and we start setting up, and we start playing a few songs, and they just were not very thrilled about what we were playing, and I was like, all right, I'm gonna try and I know this is like a country-ish place, so I had my acoustic, and I was like going to play, some covers that I figured would resonate with the people, and Justin was with us at the time, and he had been swinging some back before this, and so he was like feeling buzzed, and he was like, man, let me play with you on the side, and he was like pretty much like an Alan Jackson song I was playing that people would know, and then he was like soloing the whole time over it, and it just like that, I think, pissed people off even more to hear a song that they could have vibed with, but then it's like this crazy rendition of it. And the guy, like after that song, the guy who had booked us there, the bar owner was like, "Look, we thought y'all were gonna be something else. So like, here's $100, and y'all just get the fuck out of here." I was like, "All right, I'm gone. I'll take that."
See ya.
$100 to play 3 songs and leave, no problem. Oh shit.
Yeah, there are definitely a lot of small, shitty places around.
What was one of the more like brutal shows that you had to play that was just like, oh my god, let's get the hell out of here type situation?
Oh, a lot of them.
Really?
I can't think of one exactly like your situation, but I will say 2 weeks ago I went to go to Kentucky to do Louder Than Life with Anthrax, and Slayer's headlining, Till Lindemann directly before him, and then us before Till. And we show up and it's raining. Of course, there's a hurricane coming through. It's the one that went through Asheville.
Oh wow.
And it's just raining and raining, and then the stages that they do these shows on have like they're temporary structures, so they have like certain conditions that when the wind is a certain thing, they have to do certain things like take the wind walls down so that the wind doesn't blow the stage over or whatever. And like it was windy, so they had to keep the wind wall down, and because the wind wall was down, it was raining all over the stage. There wasn't a single spot that it wasn't raining on.
God.
And like, you know, time keeps going by and they're like, yeah, we're just waiting for it to clear up. And then like, you know, we're a few hours from having to start and we haven't even cracked our truck yet. And they're like, yeah, like we need y'all to play. And we're like, we need a place to set up that isn't, you know,
Wet,
like
yeah.
wet. And we're just like, that was like an arduous show to do. We were just like waiting, and it finally the festival decides to cancel because of course, you know, nobody can set up or do anything. It's just raining, and the wind was the main factor that did it, because once it hits a certain mile an hour, they have to like everybody has to leave the stage for like X amount of time. And that happened right before they like opened doors, and they're like, there's no way we can like start the show if the headliner hasn't even set anything up yet, you know?
Oh my god.
But it was like just being rained on all day. We're like, oh, come on, like just cancel it. Let us go. Like we're just going to stand around all day getting wet, you know? Like,
yeah.
Stuff like that, or like show up to a venue and they have like a decent stage. It's like, okay, we can do this, but then there's nothing else, no other room for anything. And of course we're on tour with an 18-wheeler full of gear, and we have all these empty cases that need places to go, or like trying to like jigsaw or traffic jam another band onto stage as another one's leaving. And it's just like, God, this is a nightmare. Like logistically, this is very frustrating, you know, like that is a constant one that happens.
What about like band peeps wanting to fight each other on stage, or any kind of fight the crowd type shit? You ever had any of that?
Not with the bigger bands I toured with. That band Butt Rocks I toured with, I do remember a thing where we were playing in Alabama or Mississippi, and of course Wells has his pedal board out at the front of the stage. And this drunk guy in the front keeps on reaching over trying to touch it, and I run out and I'm like, do not touch this. And he's like, oh, and then he does it again, and Wells, he has a drink in his hand. Wells grabs the drink out of his hand and throws it right in his face. He has like a wireless guitar system, so he jumps off the stage and is like poking the dude and still playing the guitar while the song is going off, like trying to get security to come over.
That's
like
awesome.
that's a good example of that.
Yeah, Josh was telling me, I think one time he was like helping do, I don't know if he was like helping load gear for them back in the day or something like that. And Blake, the drummer, was like, he's kind of a hothead too, and I don't know if somebody was like getting in his face or doing something, and he like punched a dude in the chest and knocked him out by punching him in the chest. And he was like, wow, that was an interesting thing, you know? It's not often that happens.
Yeah, Blake. I'm friends with Blake as well. He's toured with like Seven Dust as their guitar tech and other bands. But I remember a story about him. We were like loading out of a venue, and there's always like groupie chicks around, and like he was talking to one, and he like wanted to stop talking to her, so he blew her off, and like she was outside of the bar, and I think the show had ended, so they're not letting anybody back in, and she's just like outside, you know, like, fuck you, Blackie fucking Velvet, fuck you.
Good times.
Yep.
Well, cool, man. I could listen to freaking band stories all night for sure.
Yeah, we'll have to do another dedicated one for stories. I'll have to like remember some and write them down, because I'm just not pulling any out of my head right now.
Well, I'm glad you made it out, man. It's good,
Yeah, thank
good
you. Thanks for having me.
Excellent. Well, you got any final words you want to tell the crowd?
This guy's awesome. He's very smart. Check out his games, play them, give him your money, consume.
Appreciate the plug there, my man. Until next time, everybody. Peace out.